We take scrap metals and upcycle those scrap metals to produce high-value electrical wires and cables. This is the underpinning and backbone of electrification. How are you going to really integrate into the supply chain at scale and build a big business if you cannot compete on price and cost, as well as also having those reduction in carbon? Europe only produces about 3% of global copper supply, so we don't produce that much. There is expected to be a copper supply gap by 2032. There's not enough primary copper deposits globally to meet the global demand. I need to ask your advice on the name. A lot of people are like, so you're French, you speak French.
Yeah.
I never actually asked. So Recupere comes to you naturally,
Yeah.
right? But this is positioned as a global business.
Okay.
So then the debate becomes, does everyone know how to say Recupere? And a lot of English people I talk to, they're like, Katie, how am I supposed to say this? Is it Recupere, Recupere? And so we were debating yesterday. We were like, oh, do we take off one E? So it's Recupere.
Okay.
So it's super easy
Yeah.
for English colloquial to pick it up.
Also sounds like recopper.
Recupere, or Recupere. But we were debating it for ages, names, right? And you look and it's like, okay, we'll land with this one. But
So
I like the name now because I think it's unique. The only nuance is if we want to be a global business, making sure that everyone can pronounce it.
yeah.
But I think my view is the more people know about Recupere, the more people say it. And so it becomes like a self-fulfilling thing, right? So I don't know.
Okay. Cool. Well, let's get started. Katie, so excited to have you today. Congratulations. You've just announced a 4 million seed round. And one of the things that stands out to me when we were chatting before is between the date of launching the round and the date you got the term sheets, approximately 30 days passed. I think in the tough fundraising environment right now, it is really, really good. So what do you think, played in your favor there?
I mean, it wasn't easy, right? I think, look, it is a super tough time for founders to fundraise. I think we hear about it. But actually, I think if you're hitting the right fundamentals as a business, it's still an okay time to fundraise. I think the key thing from my side is I kind of have a background in fundraising. So I know to some extent how to actually execute a really good process. So I think it's two things. One, it's the build up before you even launch. So raise when you're not raising, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Build those relationships, have a lot of interactions with VCs to say, hey, we are coming to market by X. Build that education. And that's the key piece. So it's like personal relationships, trust in the founders, and that knowledge and education piece. And then the second piece is just being really slick on data room, what's in the data room, process, and then execution. So I think that's the two things. So it's the pre-confidence build and then the confidence build during. And I actually did go out with quite a tight timeline, being like, launching on the 6th. I want term sheets by the end of the month. I want to close this by the end of the year. That's it, right? Clear communication from the beginning. So yeah, those would be my thoughts.
I think one of the things as well is like having a very tight timeline also allows you to pull strings a little bit with different investors, because one of the things is like you have to find urgency, right? Because if there is no urgency to act for them, no one's going to commit. But if they know that by the end of the month someone is going to commit, then everybody starts to walk.
Yeah.
So
and there's a lot of pre-prep, right? Like I actually started on the data room in July, started on the list of investors who I want in July, so that by the time I launch in October, I'm not launching cold. I'm launching with 2 weeks of back-to-back calls from 8 till 8, half an hour slots, boom, boom, boom. After a while, I do not want to hear myself pitch Recupere anymore, but you do have to do that prep beforehand, like fully. Now, there are some, I guess, annoying pieces where you can't always shuffle everyone along on the same timeline to create that kind of competitive tension. And not every investor likes that competitive tension, right? So they kind of want to come in early. So you have to always balance that as well. So if you build relationships too well and they're like, okay, can you give us early access to the data room? You're like, okay, I can, but do you know I am going to go to the market? So you either come in quick or, yeah.
One of the things we haven't mentioned is that I think you have raised about 500 million at your prior company.
Hmm.
That probably helps.
It's true. I think maybe. I guess it's all about at the beginning, right? This is the first official round for us. What is there really at this point for the company, right? There's this huge vision, but we are selling as founders opportunity and the ability to disrupt a market that, to be candid, hasn't been disrupted in years and years. So you have to have faith that the founders have the ability to do that. And I think that's what all investors look for. So founder ability, and then the opportunity. But potentially, yes, the CV probably helps in this one.
um, I guess we haven't talked about it yet, but like, tell me, what is Recupere doing actually?
Yeah. So you'd think I should do this now in like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. Let me know if you want the 30 seconds. So fundamentally, Recupere Metals. See us, though, going forward, a big vision is we're a multi-metal play. So we fundamentally take scrap metals and upcycle those scrap metals to produce high-value electrical wires and cables. So this is the underpinning and backbone of electrification. Why are we doing it? Well, we're wanting to really onshore and drive a sovereign supply of metals. So we're starting with copper alloys. We want to go into aluminium. Fundamentally, therefore, we take copper scrap, upcycle it, and produce high value wires used in data centers, wind turbines, EVs, automotives.
And why do you think no one has done it before? I mean, it seems like from an idea perspective, I'm like, well, we have all of this copper that is not being used.
Mm.
It has some value, obviously. So why do you think no one has gone after it before you?
I think it's two things. One, and this is what I love about it, right? This is a traditionally old, unsexy industry, and so hasn't been disrupted in years, right? It remains on its own paradigm. And historically, and it has always been, purity solves for conductivity. So the big thing in using copper wires for electrical uses is I need to have conductivity requirements in those copper wires. The current consideration today is to solve for that conductivity, I need purity. We're changing that paradigm and saying, hey, don't worry about purity. We can solve this from a conductivity perspective. So we increase conductivity. That's the first thing. So it's the thinking and the innovation around it. The second piece is knowledge gap. And actually, this is big kudos to Julien, my co-founder here. He studied for 5 years a really niche topic, the microstructure of small diameter wires. There's not many people in the world that have done that. 1 in 5, he thinks. So there's a knowledge piece as well. So that's how we can come at it from an angle of, hey, let's increase conductivity. Don't worry about purity.
And so the technical innovation that you bring to the market is to say you are able to compete from, I mean, obviously from a cost perspective, we will talk about that later, but purely like from a purity and conductivity perspective, you're able to compete with scrap copper.
Correct. So what we do is we take scrap and we upcycle it to produce then the measures that you need exactly the same for if you were going to get a primary product. So it's exactly the same from a tech spec perspective. There's no compromise from a customer on the fact that this is recycled scrap copper.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's one of the key unlock when we think about climate tech, right? It's be as good as the incumbent at the same price, and then everybody wants your product.
But this is the key thing going at the beginning. Like, how do you fundraise within 4 weeks? Yeah, it's a combination of execution, credentials, future vision, communicating that. I think actually the skill set that maybe I have is taking something really complicated and simplifying it down so people can understand it. I think the key other thing as well is having those bare fundamentals of a business, right? We're not in the world anymore where we should be relying on green premiums, unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to become it. My background is obviously very investment banking mathsy, so I come at it from a very pragmatic view. Well, we have to compete. How are you going to really integrate into the supply chain at scale and build a big business if you cannot compete on price and cost, as well as also having those reduction in carbon? Now, there are other considerations, right? Other business models where you need a moonshot, you need amazing ideas that maybe cannot be cost competitive from day one.
Yeah.
But the vision for this business was we want to integrate at scale quickly to solve the upcoming copper supply gap and really drive electrification. To do that, we want to be cost competitive and price parity. Yeah.
And do you think that that relationship with someone that is very, very technical and you come more from that finance side
Mm.
makes it a good combo to build a company?
I think, and I wish Julian was here because then he would be like, we're super complementary, right? And I think the best teams, the best co-founding teams, you need to have healthy challenge, right? I think it's super important that I have a different perspective to what Julien has from a co-founder perspective. And so we can challenge each other in a healthy manner, right? Explain this to me. Explain it to me as if you were explaining it to your grandma, right? And it makes sure there's no miscommunication. Because I think a lot of successes of businesses or failures of a business fundamentally come down to trust and communication. I mean, it's like relationships, right? I joke with Julien that he's fundamentally my work husband, and I have a husband at home, and so you have to have that foundation of communication and healthy challenge.
Because you guys are in it for the next 10 years or more.
Exactly. I mean, there's you buy into that at the beginning, right? As a founder, yeah.
When we think about the copper market, I'd love to chat with you a bit more about the situation, and both from a global perspective, but as well from a European perspective. You mentioned sovereignty just earlier. Where do we stand? Because do we have enough supply of copper? Is Europe producing any copper? Like, where do we stand?
Europe only produces about 3% of global copper supply, so we don't produce that much.
Or any, basically.
Well, a very, very small amount.
Yeah.
And that, that's just because that's just how it is. Um, we do not have enough primary copper deposits. So we are an importer of copper. Um, and going forward, our demand is going to outstrip supply because we need a lot more copper for electrification, EVs, et cetera, et cetera. So we will continually become a net importer of copper. The second challenge to that is there is expected to be a copper supply gap by 2032. There's not enough primary copper deposits globally to meet the global demand. And so that's twofold. So then you have a problem where, one, Europe and the US does not have enough primary copper deposits. We also globally are going to have a global copper supply gap by 2032, 2035. Now, you read any articles, there is a slight nuance in when it's going to happen and a significant gap, but that's the overall trend in the consideration. So going forward, there's going to be a scarcity of copper supply. The other consideration is we do not have enough industrial manufacturing ability within Europe currently now from a smelting perspective. So what currently happens is a significant amount of smelting is concentrated in Asia, mostly China. So we really need to think about solving the problem other ways. And the way that we're coming at it from is saying, okay, don't rely on primary. Yes, there is a need for primary to continue and enhancements there, right? It's just such a huge problem. It needs to be solved from multiple angles.
But we can't really do anything about it in Europe anyway if we don't have enough of it in the grounds, basically.
Correct. Yeah. So globally, we should
Yeah.
focus on increasing or solving the primary solution, as well as the fact that we really need to think about, okay, how do we drive a more robust, resilient supply chain that drives a resilient supply chain for Europe and the US? And this is the key piece. And so we then went at it from saying, okay, let's take scrap. Let's focus on scrap. And how can we do that? And this is where the enhancement of conductivity piece comes from. So you take scrap, you enhance the conductivity of it, overcoming the impurities present within the scrap to then produce high value copper. It means you don't have any reliance on primary copper in the supply chain. You don't have any smelting reliance in your supply chain. And smelting is the key carbon intensive and cost intensive step in all of this. So you remove that, you have a much leaner supply chain.
I love that because I had a conversation with a circular economy investor, and what you ultimately are doing is some sort of circular economy play, right?
Yep.
One of the things he said to me is you shouldn't start with the waste. In other words, you should start with a problem that you're trying to solve, and then if there is waste for it, then that maybe creates a model rather than saying, hey, there is scrap copper, what can we do with it?
Yep.
Which makes it such a viable business because from the get-go, you're like, okay, we're solving a problem. No matter where we're taking the input from, we're solving a problem, which I think is a very smart way of doing it.
Yep.
When we think about the industries that you're trying to tackle, so we talked about EVs, we talked about wind turbines, we talked about data centers. Just have like really strategic industries. Is that why you picked this one? Is it because they are high value, or is it more because that's where the need is for copper?
So it's two pieces. One is that, yeah, the high value of electrical wires is mostly sold to these industries. The second piece is they're in real need of it. And the key one, and with our existing customer traction, the majority of customer traction actually so far has come from the automotive industry. Why? Because they really need to have a reliant copper supply and are aware of the upcoming scarcity. So they need to de-risk their supply. And so that's where a lot of our initial commercial traction has come from. It's the automotive industry. Second to that is in Europe, we also have, so it's the bare economics here. It's the scarcity of supply, but we also have tailwinds with us around regulation that support us, right? End of life vehicle regulation coming down. So there's this need for circular agreements. And as you said, we take the waste, we take the end of life, we can put it all the way back through and then solve the problem. So there's two key pieces from them. As well as the fact that you've got the 100% recycled scrap there and a more transparent EU supply chain.
Did you ever come at it with a climate angle? Because I know when we chatted earlier, you have had for a while now this idea of trying to build something meaningful for the world. Was there a moment where you thought, okay, I need to do something from a climate perspective, and that seems to be the right business to go after?
Well, my career background in terms of moving into the climate world there was a decision I kind of made in 2019. So then did a year doing impact investing and then joined a large utility scale battery storage business. In that business, I actually started having conversations with people around changing cabling from copper to aluminium because aluminium is much cheaper and copper scarcity supply and risks there. So it was a little thought process. And then when I moved to Paris, I met the Marble team and Julien, and said, "Kid, what problems do you want to solve?" And this copper problem, I'm aware of this because this was a key consideration in my prior life. So it was the connecting the dots. Uh, but in addition to that, from Julien's side, he also, through the Marble program, identified that one, he had the solution potentially that could solve the copper supply gap by coming at it from this conductivity angle. So that's when we as co-founders starting having more of a dance around this co-founder relationship. What's the actual business model here? What can we build? How do we solve this? So I think twofold considerations. I came at it from the electrification battery angle beforehand, and Julien came at it very much from his PhD background and bring it to. It's such a huge problem. We talked about it before a little bit around how do you solve a significant amount of supply gap. And you can come at it from a primary angle and an enhancements there and increases efficiencies. But really it comes back to we need to focus on scrap copper and secondary copper in Europe.
What's the climate impact of copper today, and how much can you reduce it through like upcycling copper?
The majority of carbon emissions in the supply chain, if you just look at it end to end, is from that smelting process. Now, I will say, first off, I really want us to do a full in-house LCA here. So this is the key goal, but I want to do it when we have our first industrial plant. So from 2027 onwards, we'll do a full in-house LCA. That's the plan. So we can actually know exactly what the measures are. Now we're obviously relying on third-party resources, right? So you're doing a like-for-like comps between primary copper and smelting. Smelting assumptions can sometimes assume they use 100% renewable energy, which is quite favorable. So you can then take it with a pinch of salt a little bit. But fundamentally, if you look at us versus a primary copper, we're 18 times lower.
Wow.
That is predominantly because there's no smelting in this process as well. So now when we actually do it in-house, I want this to be really robust and done really well. At the moment, it's relying on third-party data for that.
When we think about the next step for the company, so as you said, you and the lab now, you will start building that industrial first kind of factory or production line. What are some of the key risks that you're seeing today for the next stage? Because obviously you're at the very, very early days of the company, right?
Yeah. This has been the fun bit, right? I've got to sell opportunity and potential and vision, and now we've actually really got to execute. So this is the next step is really around execution risk in my mind, right? that's the key success of the business, which is not just the tech piece.
Hmm.
Here, it's a mechanical process. So when we're relying on off-the-shelf machinery, so it's no hardware innovation here. Our innovation is mostly in the software side. And that's really key. So actually, where are the risks? Well, we want to have our first commercial plant up and running by October 2027, 2028. And so our key focus there is actually production and process risk. Does my feedstock come in when I expect it to come in? So a logistical play. Do we produce the wires in the timeline that we expect it to produce the wires? And do we then sell our wires when we expect to sell it? So you've matched process, machinery, production line risk with overall working capital risk requirements. So I think for me, that's the collective risk. It's process execution risk at the construction level, overlay that with the working capital risk of the company.
I
Yeah.
want to react on what you said on the software
Mm.
component. What is the software component of this? I wasn't expecting any of it.
So our tech, fundamentally two pillars is how I like to describe it. So two foundational pillars. First, we have a mechanical process. That mechanical process uses off-the-shelf machinery. So fundamentally, that enables us to flow more electrons through the wire, overcoming the presence of the impurities. So that's what we're doing to increase the conductivity. The second pillar, which is actually where our trade secrets lies, and it's the, I guess, the real value add bit, is we have proprietary characterization methods. Those enable us to drive proprietary data set. That data set then feeds our machine learning controller, and that spits out fundamentally what we need to do to the mechanical process in order to ensure that we always produce a homogeneous product that has enhanced conductivity. So the USP here, the exciting bit, is that proprietary data set. Yeah.
So meaning that basically, like, the true value in what you're doing from an innovation perspective is to be able to measure it properly and feed that into your model so that you always improve. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we have a nice way to look at it is we have ways that Julien has developed that enable us to characterize the feedstock in more ways than it's ever been done before. So we have an additional data set that enables us to drive better output to increase that conductivity.
Okay, really interesting. I wouldn't have thought about the software component of this business.
But that's what I love about us, right? That gives us the edge because you can replicate this across multiple metals. So that's why I want people to see us as a multi-metal business. It also enables us to scale at a pace that relies on then off-the-shelf machinery, so you can be smart around execution timelines and risk, but also then your financing plan. So here the financing plan can be slightly different because I am not doing first-of-a-kind hardware. I've got quite boring off-the-shelf machinery enabled by this new data set. So that's the key piece that actually is then enabling a hopefully, this is all vision I'm selling you, but the plan is then to have a much leaner or optimized cap table to enable that scale.
So do you think that will unlock debt financing?
That's my plan, and that's my background. So yes, we can be smart here around the use of equity and the use of equipment financing and the use of working capital facilities and debt. Yeah.
If you were to look at the business from your prior life, would you have backed it with debt?
Yeah, so good question. I think it's really interesting, right? Because different hats. We're super early, right? So my prior life, when I was at JP Morgan, this would have been way too early, right? So give me 5 years. We need to get to a first commercial plant scale, generate first, top line revenue, and then go to players like that. That's fully on the roadmap. Now where we are, you need, earlier debt financing. Equipment financing is great though, right? Because it can be asset backed against the equipment.
Yeah.
So given it's off the shelf, that's a really nice piece to tackle first. Then after that, you can get more project financing, asset backed financing, and then longer term evolve your debt table to have a bit more lower cost of capital, corporate loan type structures. Yeah.
It makes sense. When we think about the cost of what you're doing and the price when you will sell it to customer, we also need to talk about the business model there. But when we think about the cost, like what's the cost associated today with scrap copper? Because it probably is a cost for some of the players. And how much of an upside in value do you bring to that scrap copper?
Yeah. So scrap copper trades around 2,000 to 4,000 US dollar per ton.
Do people buy scrap
Yeah.
copper today? Okay.
Yeah. So it's a full marketplace that has its own trading value.
So the supply chain is already built.
The supply chain is already built. Yeah. We're not innovating on the supply chain. The key piece on our supply chain is integration into the supply chain. How do we integrate the best into the supply chain? And that's the key piece. But the supply chain already exists. So it trades around those values. We then take that and increase the value at least 3 times. So we produce then our wires, which is at the price parity level, which the price of these electrical wires is at around a 15 to 20% premium to the copper LME index. So that's the value driver that we're changing.
So by doing 3x on the scrap copper value, basically you are reaching cost parity.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Um, Well, look, I'd be curious to hear a bit of the current discussion you have with customers. Um, what I see in what you're doing is that there's multiple aspects of it, as we talked about already. So there's a supply chain risk that you're reducing for them. There's emissions, CO2 emissions, kind of. I wouldn't call it a risk by now, but something some people care about, not enough, if you ask me. And then there's also the cost, which is like from what I understand from you, is like it probably is maybe a bit more stable
Mm,
than what copper could be. So what do they care about today?
mm. First is scarcity of supply. So how can they de-risk their supply chains? Most customers are aware that primary copper is going to be more challenging to get their hands on. How do they de-risk that? Well, they need to get hands on recycled copper. And if I can say to them 100% recycled, so scrap only, that's a key plus for them. Then in addition to that is cost considerations. Price parity has to be price parity. So that's really key. And long term, we also want to move away from this premium to LME price that has driven the market for so long, because our feedstock isn't primary copper, it's scrap. And scrap isn't actually linked in price to the LME index.
Mm.
So that's something that's really interesting. Saying, hey, long term, so now we're price parity, we're not changing anything on a pricing model, but long term, we want to move away from the premium to LME. That gives you a nice de-risk away from the copper LME index as well. And then to your point, the third piece is 100% recycled copper, meaning 18 times lower carbon emissions and EU transparency across the supply chain. But that's the third cell. And to your point, I think, look, I love being in businesses and now founding a business that is underpinned by a climate angle. But to integrate into the supply chain just pragmatically, we have other edges that I sell first. Yeah.
When if we try to do a forecast, and we're going to get toward the end of this episode, but if we try to do a forecast, if the company is super successful 10 years from now, what does it look like?
No, I'd love for this to happen, obviously. So look, I think in my mind, it's a multi-metal play globally that is vertically integrated. So we take scrap, we sell it all the way on, and we produce a variety of different products. So we don't just produce wires, we do cables. We can also do copper foils. We want to go into other areas of the business because data centers mostly use copper foils, actually. Their air and cooling systems use the wire, but their copper foils is the key piece. So we want to be a multi-metal, multi-product business underpinned fundamentally by this data set and leaner innovation. That's where I see us being. And that's what gets me excited, right? How can you enable electrification, but also just completely disrupt a supply chain that hasn't been disrupted in years and years and years? So that's exciting. Yeah.
I'll refer people to one of the episodes we've done with Hampus and Matthew from Voyager, Hampus from Bay Blue Dot, because Hampus loves disruption in good old industries. Well, what can we do to, if someone is listening right now, no matter who they are, what can they do to help you get there?
Yeah. So I think, so what are the risks, right, for the business? And then how can I de-risk them? Look, I always said, you can have the best idea. I think we have a brilliant idea. I think we have a brilliant ability here. We've proved it already. We just now need to execute on it. But we need great people to do that. So that's the key piece. Either in terms of sparring, you've got knowledge in this sector, you healthily challenge me. I'm always up for a healthy challenge. But that's key. And that's how we want to hire great talent in order to get us there.
I mean, if you want to advertise, if you have people that you're looking for, please, that's your time to do so.
There we go. Name drop specific titles. No, we're looking for our plant manager, to the person that sees the first end-to-end delivery of our first commercial plant. Super exciting role, right? This is like you are groundbreaking here. So first commercial plant manager, and then also head of commercial finance. So those are the two risks that which I talk about: production facility risk, but also bring overall the working capital facilities, feedstock offtake contracts, negotiation, and parceling that all together. But there'll be lots of other roles as we scale as well. And then in addition to that is the customer side, right? Integration into the supply chain is super, super important. So how can you help? It's one, hey, talk to this person, I know, or this company. They definitely need to de-risk their copper supply chain, have a conversation with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you're up for a great challenge, I'm happy to do an introduction as well if someone's listening and want to reach out to you. One last question for you today. What's your proudest moment so far in that journey?
Oh, Julian and I discuss this regularly. We're really bad, actually, at celebrating the wins. I'm always like, okay, next. So what's the proudest moment? I think what's I'm really proud of is that we sat down for dinner actually with the team, and it's really nice. You feel proud, right? Because at the beginning you've got nothing really. You're selling. You're selling. And then when you have convinced people to join you and work hard and have a blank piece of paper and try and deliver on it, right? It's not easy. It's not easy. And I think that's the proudest moment, right? When you sit down around a table for dinner, you enjoy the dinner of the work colleagues, and that's super, super important, right? And building a culture where everyone feels that they have ownership, they have belonging, they want to solve problems, and they know it's not going to be easy for them to get there. So I think the proudest moment is really thinking about the team and where the teams come.
Yeah, I've never had someone not say something about people to this question. Like everybody's all about, and or at least with great entrepreneurs, it's often the reason is people, like bringing a great team around them
Yeah.
is the thing that makes them proud.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much for today. For listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone in your network, maybe someone in the copper industry. And don't forget to subscribe to the New Wave on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I will also put the link to Katie's profile and Recupere Metals in the comment section below. Katie, thank you so much and congratulations again.
No, thank you. Thank you for your time.